Good evening, and thank you for your patience. Well, this wasn't a hack attack, by the way. It was apparently something to do with a certificate. But seeing as we've waited, kept you waiting, I'm going to be short, although I want to give Professor Al-Khazaimi a due. But I'm sure you all know her, especially if you were at Ozgur Sinanoglu's lecture about a month ago when she introduced him and introduced herself. She's, to remind you, currently a research assistant professor at NYU Abu Dhabi and the director of the Center of Cybersecurity at New York University Abu Dhabi. She served in different posts for research and development in cybersecurity and cryptology during the past few years, and has associations at the highest level in this sector, in this domain, with both nationally and internationally. So Dr. Khazaemi has a particular interest or expertise in cryptology. The title of her talk is Crypto Wars, from Ceasar to Quantum Powers and Smart Cities. I can read backwards. So her particular expertise is in cryptology. So this includes cryptanalysis, constructing and validating security hardware and software components, constructing trusted security architectures for different environments and different products for diverse industries. She obtained a PhD in cryptanalysis from Denmark, at Denmark Technical University. Her current research interests include space, aerospace, and UAV security, constructing and analyzing cryptographic primitives, validating and investigating links between different cryptanalytic approaches, and utilizing cryptographic primitives in different cybersecurity architectures. I understood some of that, but I'm sure you all understood more of it. I'm looking forward to this talk. Please welcome Hoda Al-Khazaimi to the stage.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Masa al-khair. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for lending your night to our second talk in the series of Cyber Talk. And stay tuned for more to come, inshallah, from Center for Cybersecurity. Tonight, we are going to discuss crypto. And no auto, we're not going to discuss mass surveillance, because crypto wars, if you Googled it, then it will be something will pop up around mass surveillance of cryptographic protocols and all of this. So now we're going to discuss the evolution of a crypto and how the community that worked around initiating and designing crypto primitives took in hand a responsibility to build better crypto for the different industries and designs. Can I start with a question by asking who dealt with the crypto here in the house? Okay, have a few hands. Who doesn't know anything about crypto? Nice. My kind of audience. And who thinks that they might be right now using crypto within their systems? Oh, good, awareness. I could see some of you coming from space agency. I could see people coming from health industry. Thank you for showing up today. People from oil and gas, and people from entertainment in the back. So thank you so much for being here. And I would like to, emphasize on the fact that all of us in this room, if we're using a digital device, then we do use crypto. So what's crypto? Cryptology is the science, I would say, an art, because it evolved from an artistic perspective and then came into science of construction and validation of certain primitives that will build your security, your integrity, and your authentication around the system against having a certain adversarial pressure, okay? So it evolved from random errors to targeted errors. So it evolved from code theory and all of these aspects when the first communication system wanted to send satellite images from the moon to Earth. So they used most of code theories around, and they sent huge images that had certain errors and certain faults. But in the crypto system, we deal with induced faults. So maybe that's the plain text ciphered and garbled and sent through the channel, and then deciphered on the other hand, on the other end of the. So it would look something like this. I'm sure most of you who looked at the text of Cryptology, I could see people here, yeah, could identify this picture. So you would have your communication link, and through your communication link here, you would use one of the crypto primitives. This crypto primitive could be a hash function, a cipher that is used for encryption and decryption, or a public key system that would be used for authentication. And then your ultimate goal is whatever your crypto primitive is to make sure you protect M, which is your message, and make sure that you can send it through the channel and then decrypt it at the end. Okay? Easy? Too much information? We'll be there. We'll get there soon. So how can you build a taxonomy around crypto primitives? You will have what we call symmetric cryptologic primitives, which are like hash functions, ciphers, stream ciphers, block ciphers, and you use them on YouTube, for example, if you want to encrypt a video communication, then it will use a stream cipher by default, which is going to encrypt a bit by bit. If you are using, for example, a larger communication where you want to section this communication into blocks, then you will use a block cipher and send it through the communication channel to protect your security. In symmetric systems, you will use a single key. So if in this picture, the sender and the receiver will have the same key, and then this is the reason why it's called symmetric. And in asymmetric systems, you would use what we call public dual key system, where you would have your private and public key. Your private key you would use to encrypt and send messages, and your public key you would send to recover messages. Okay? And mixed models that are composed of both, because in today's technology, it's not enough to use symmetric. It's too heavy. You have to use too many keys. Public key, it's fine in terms of number of keys that you're using, but again, there is an issue with how fast it works. So there is a hybrid system which encapsulate symmetric cryptology with the rest, okay? So what would a normal human being think when I discuss crypto? You would think of your iPhone device or your Samsung phone, and whenever you send a text from one person to another, maybe right now with WhatsApp, I think most of you heard that WhatsApp enabled encryption on the devices. So your communication will be encrypted. I had a person in the house, I don't see Yasser, but Yasser used to tell me stories about him sitting in coffee shops and just sniffing packets from Android mobile phones and reading all the clear text messages of WhatsApp. And of course, right now, you can maybe sleep a little bit, in a very safe mode, knowing that, WhatsApp enabled encryption on the devices. So, good, step ahead. 2017, we had encryption since ever, and 2017, a major company that uses chatting decided to encrypt these messages. No worries. So you will find them in your browsers. You will find them in your satellite communication systems. Major satellite communication system would use different ciphers. We know Athuraya, for example, it's a major communication satellite company, exists in UAE. They enabled encryption on the different communication modes that they are using. Your smart card, the cards that you use within your, for example, to access buildings, they would use encryption on them. Your RFID tags, like if you have, I will introduce a cipher later on, and you would see that we have a cipher that exists in order to, all of these RFID tags that you have in the back of the book when you go to the library and just, get a book. And these tags are just also, they enable encryption at some level. So from huge devices to small devices, all of things around you would have cryptographic primitive at one point or another. Why? Because cryptography is viewed as the basic building block of security. If you want to build security on top of different layers, for example, protocols or other physical security, then you would have to use cryptography at a certain level, okay? Or locking somehow. Okay, so how did it evolve? How did we go from ciphers back in the days to what we have at the moment? I would take you through a journey of what we had in the past until what we have now, okay? So a major note here is to highlight that cryptography is a contribution of different nations, and it's evolution of different nations together. So it's not a single nation or a single country or a single population contributing to this. What we know in the text is what have been transported to us in terms of information, but there might be certain missing packets and the translation that we missed around certain nations that also use cryptology. So can you identify these? This series of languages and artifacts belongs to 1900 BC until 3000 actually. This is a Sumerian writing. You would see some in the Louvre, okay? So it's from 3500 BC. And you could tell that this nation strived in order to communicate among each other. You could create a universal language, right? Why would you create a very selective language to a certain number of people? Because you wanted only these few people to be able to communicate through them. So we have the Sumerian writings here. We have the holographic writing for the Egyptians, one of the very oldest encryption ciphers. We have the Chinese writing on this side. So an evolution of languages, an evolution of communication, because human beings, they're social, they wanted to communicate, but they were mindful of their own privacy, and they wanted to make sure communication can be only done within sectors of groups of people. So every nation invented their own language, and even within these nations would have groups inventing their own set of languages that they understand themselves, not the others. So, and then we have series of very distinct cryptographic traces that we could see in the old literature. So we could see this is a text from the book of Al-Kindi, and Al-Kindi is a polymathematician, and he is also an Arabic scientist who worked on the verge of art and science. He was consumed as anybody else. I think it's not only him, but the rest of the scientists at that era, they did not define themselves as being only followers of science or followers of art. They would merge both all disciplines together. And the wave of translations that happened in that era, where you translate text from, for example, Latin to Arabic and Arabic to different texts, dictated on these kind of scientists to make sure that they have a dictionary for this translation. So they will translate the books in an abstract form, and they would keep their own dictionaries in order to reflect later on these types of translation. So Al-Kindi was one of the first few people who did kind of an encryption to the text that he has. And then he did a frequency analysis to it. So he wanted to make sure that you can tell from the language frequency that you have, and he described it in his book as well. How can you tell the frequency analysis? You know that, for example, of the highest letters exhibited within the text was, for example, a certain letter, then that letter would most probably reflect the highest letter within the common language within that nation or that group of people. And this is Atash. Can you identify the writing? It's in Hebrew. So this is one of the oldest ciphers that was identified for that era. And we have the Scytale, which is a Greek invention for a substitution cipher. And later on, we'll be defining a substitution cipher where you substitute what you have in the text with a shift of the letters that you have. So you would have this wooden piece, and then you would just wrap around it a leather piece that has the letter on it. And the diameter of the wooden letter will decide on the level of substitutions that you will be able to make, okay? Then the evolution comes here, where we have I would say, the Greek innovative era of making sure that you go around the world, and the discovery era of everything. So Ceasar started with his own substitution cipher, and this substitution cipher was around making sure that you can shift. For example, you could see here, if you apply the key of 19, then you shift every position of every element here by 19 positions. And again, we have a sophisticated view of this by Leon Alberti. And Leon Alberti was an architect, and he designed the first disk cipher, hardware disk cipher, because he built the disk component and he wanted to build his own polyalphabetic cipher. So it's not a single substitution, but like a matrix of substitutions that you should join together in order to have these ciphers. Beautiful. And then we reach, can you identify this? It's the Enigma machine, right? So this is one of the, what's called is the hardware ciphers or machine ciphers. So it was introduced at the end of World War I by German troops. So German in the house, that's yours. Okay, they wanted to communicate between the different troops, okay? And in here you could see that a level of complexity is added. So we started with Ceasar where you have one single rotation for the substitution. Then Alberti came and he added 2 or 3 level of substitutions. But here, for this German ciphering machine, you would have 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, depending on the routers that you have in the machine. And each router will have a substitution that will be affected by the key that you will enter to this machine. This machine was broken by a Polish cryptanalyst, and then they decrypted it and then did reverse engineering on it, as everything is happening. When you have cryptography, you would have to build something and break it. So the team that breaks it will broke this and then provided the information to the British troops in order for them to design similar machines later on. In my old university, we had few designs of an Enigma machine from World War II. We used to just play around with them for a little. So this is the general model, for example, of a cipher. This is the modern era. So it's not anymore a substitution, maybe, we'll see. So you would have a message, you would have a cipher, you would have a key, encryption, and decryption. So when you want to encrypt a message, you will push it to an encryption model, whatever a mathematical model that is going to represent this encryption model, and then you will decrypt it. And then you have to make sure it's bijective mapping because it has to go both ways, because you have to be able to decrypt if you encrypt it. And we started right now of the era of making sure that we have structures. 1883, different scientists came in different stages, and they said, you can't just build any component and call that component a cryptographic primitive, because then you will be, prone to attacks or weak. So vulnerable to just receive certain attacks. So Kirchhoff started and said, you cannot just hide your design. You cannot say that I have a design and you design a certain security system and you hide that design. You have to make sure that you provide the public design and you had only the most important part of that design, which is the key. So rule number 1, hide everything except, show everything except the key. So, and then black box security, which says if you build a crypto system, then it should be secure regardless of the black box attacks that are meant for this. So if you build a system and you give it away, then whatever attacks I'm doing, black box attacks like ciphertext attacks. So this system will exhibit only the ciphertext to me. So if I had a ciphertext attack or chosen plain text ciphertext attack, then the system is supposed to be prone to that attack. When I say chosen plain text ciphertext, means I would have the plain text and ciphertext mapping together, the messages before encryption and after encryption. Shannon, the godfather of coding theory, I would say one of the initiator of what we call an ideal cipher, he came in and he said, it's not enough to just say, okay, show us the design publicly and make sure it's a black box. You have to make sure that it has certain properties. Substitution is not anymore the main property. If you will substitute bytes, it's fine, but I will still can reverse the substitution because it might be linear. So I have to introduce certain things. So the concept as well that he introduced is the concept of ideal cipher, which means a cipher should be an independent random permutation for all its existence. You cannot tell, so in plain English, it means if I sniffed your traffic, I will not be able to tell if this is encrypted traffic or unencrypted traffic. For me, it's random. So I shouldn't be able to distinguish the signature of your encryption or decryption, okay? So we got this, it's open. The communication theory says here it has to have perfect secrecy, so the message length normally maybe is the same as the key length. That's what we have in, he proved what we have called, one-time pad, and then ideal cipher. And then he said you have to make sure you have a distance between your current security margin of this cryptographic primitive and the next one. And how can you decide this? By knowing the length of your key and the length of your plain text. So he said if you have a key, K here is the length of your key, divided by the length of your plain text times whatever redundancy in your English language you will have, then you will be able to know the minimal immunity that you should have for your system. So this will tell you if you're, for example, if this is 1, it means your system is very weak. It takes 1 plain text to attack your system. It's a horrible system because you can definitely sniff and get 1 attack. But if it says it takes 2 to the power 80 messages, so maybe it's not practical to save all of these messages and build them. Okay, confusion. So confusion, you have to make sure that you destroy relationships between the input and what? And the output of your ciphertext. And destroying this relationship means that you have to use nonlinear functions, okay? You have to use nonlinear components. So make sure that you use nonlinear component, destroy relationship, fine, we did this, and then confusion, and then diffusion, which means if you broke this relationship, you need to make sure that if you changed 1 bit, everything changes in the output, or maximum changes will happen on the output. So all of these are like, right now, mathematical rules of building safe and robust crypto systems. We moved from the era where it's more about substitutions and simple methods into the era where we have to make sure that we follow certain mathematical models in order to build these products. And it's not easy to build a maximal diffusion because you have to make sure that if you induced, which is perfect for an attacker, if you introduced one single, in certain ciphers or in certain crypto systems, if you induced one single change, then the change will propagate to the next few rounds, to the full output of it. So, Dr. Khan, صح? So, a nonlinear function is a function that cannot, nonlinear mapping. A nonlinear mapping, it means you cannot go from the output to the input directly, and going back is very difficult. So let me just simplify it by saying it this way. I'm sorry for all of the mathematicians in the house. I just want to say it in plain English. Thank you, Dr. Khan. I know you are a mathematician, so maybe you wanted the audience to know. Thank you so much. Thank you. So, and then Shannon said it should be a product. So you shouldn't have a single layer. So you have diffusion, confusion, diffusion, confusion. So you have to layer your whole system, and you build it in iteration. So now our primitives will look like this, okay? Will look like this, something like this. So instead of having one single layer, we will have several layers here that we can put finally into hardware or software. So this is what we call a Feistel structure, where you do the parallel, where you just split your input to different layers. And then, you could see here the key addition, for example. You could see the substitution layer in the S boxes, which is our nonlinear layer. And then you could see here the diffusion happening, and you could see the layering as well. So it's a product of this happening several times. So a standard cipher that we have at the moment, is it enough? Is this level of security enough? No, it's not enough. So the community said, fine. They started having competitions. Maybe one of them, I don't know if you know, NIST competition in 1990 when they wanted to initiate, after, of course, initiating this, which is one of the encryption standards that you have in most of your banking cards, and it's broken and obsolete. So they wanted to initiate another encryption, which they called AES, for example, the Advanced Encryption Standard. And they wanted to choose this encryption. So the whole community said, no, we will not allow the design of this cipher to come from a specific lab. So they had this competition where the contribution came from every part of the world. the analysis was open, and then they could choose one of these ciphers. And they ended up choosing Belgian design. It's called Dryandel, and they choose this. This is what we are using in most of our equipment, even in your broken WBA2 at the moment since October 2017. So that's one of the designs that is being used. So the margin of security of this design, and the security margin is very important because it defines how these primitives are resilient to attacks. So the margin here is 128 bits. So the researchers said, okay, you can design something. If the key size is 128, then probably you're safe and secure. And the reason behind this we'll know in a while. It takes 2 to 128 operations. And 2 to 128 operations, thanks to Oscar talks last time, is 90 billion years in normal times without adding quantum, powers to the equation. So the community said, fine, these are standard encryption, we can fit them in, but how can we fit this in crypto devices and IoT devices or energy harvesting chips or all of these implants that you put in the human body if you want to secure these, which is, they don't have encryption at the moment, okay? Remote controls, they have like a very, very specific computational powers. And all of the other RFIDs. So would 128 be sufficient for all of these devices? So the community started again building all over the globe different initiatives to make sure that you can build crypto that's light and would not look like the huge Enigma machine, and that would fit into your mobile devices, okay? So let's fit the monster into small pieces, okay? And give it as a gift to the world. So they built this, and in mind they kept certain parameters and certain metrics. They say that if it should fit in hardware, then we have to care about the chip size, the energy consumption, the power consumption, because it affects, the energy consumption affects the battery life of that device, and the gate equivalence, it affects the size of the device, the latency, the clock cycle, it affects all of the speed and the throughput and all of these. And then the software implementation on the other side, can you optimize this code? Can you build it in smaller RAM size and all of this? So they reached a conclusion that you have to have a design which is less than 2,000 AES gate equivalence. GE stands for gate equivalence. AES, mind you, started with more than 3,000 gate equivalents. So even the standardized design that exists and that's in the standard, and it takes normally 3 years to push certain crypto standards within the cycle of being standardized and existing in all of your industry, in your satellite communication and everything. It existed for more than this gate equivalence. Then a huge awareness came to the community, and they decided we will not just design random cryptographic primitives because we will not be able to use them in hardware devices. So then they said, okay, we have to care about the power, throughput, energy, area, and they started designing different. Some of these you could see here. For example, Mcrypton was one of the designs that existed from 1990 from AES competition. You have Present, which is a new design, and Prince, which is a new hardware catered design. These are all ciphers in the picture. No hash function. Okay? Okay then. And then you have now ciphers that can fit into compact devices, hopefully. So crypto cores came into the picture. How can we make sure that we can build crypto accelerators that will compute cryptography faster? So this is what we have when we have, for example, Maxwell, Intel new processors and all of these devices. Okay, so can we have a crypto accelerator to make sure that we can push our device computation to the limit for public key encryption, for example, or for elliptic curves, or for all of these other Casomi, which is one of the ciphers that you use on your mobile phone. Then we standardized few of them. So we have Present, which is standardized 2014, Cliffia, and we have also authenticated ciphers. So the community said it's not enough to just build ciphers into separate platform. You have to make sure that they are authenticated, and they build authenticated cipher. At the moment, we have also, since 2000, okay, so what happened in 2012? Do you remember? Do you remember a guy called Snowden? So in crypto, we have this informal era, which we called pre-Snowden era and after Snowden era. So Snowden came into the picture and said, guys, you have to wake up, everybody in the crypto community, because your designs are broken, and they're all of these export rules that you have to make sure that you have standardized ciphers and pushed into the industry. It's to make sure that you are using broken crypto. So certain state nations with security state and stuff, they can have access to breaking these devices and getting to your system because they have, assumingly, quantum computational power. And he mentioned few of the designs, and one of them elliptic curves, RSA elliptic curve for one of the sizes. And the community verified that, and then for sure they discovered that, yes, it's broken. And they provided the analysis of that broken system maybe 2 months or 3 months after his revelations, which is weird. I mean, like, we have to be pointed out that it's actually happening so we can provide the proof. So then the communities as well, the academic community and the industrial community, initiated their own revolution against this because they don't want all of the design that they built for crypto to go to waste. They wanted them to be used by industry or overlaid to industry and to government. So what they did is they initiated another competition on 2 different levels, one of them in Europe and one of them in the US, but in the one in US, which is the one formalized by NIST, and the deadline for this is the end of this month, 30th, few days, where you have to aggregate and collect all post-quantum solutions that will be resilient against quantum attacks for cryptography, even if you have quantum powers. So we have New Hope, which is one of the few designs that is, even before the competition ended, latest base design, code-based crypto. And it's been also, I think, Google was one of the few companies that embraced New Hope and tried to use this design as well. Okay? So how can we verify these systems? Because normally we have them from the community. We have to verify them. Cryptanalysis comes into play here. We have to make sure that we can do certain attacks. Attack models existed. So if we don't have the analysis, the whole white box analysis of the system, then we can do black box analysis to it, and we can do reverse engineering to whatever crypto chip that we have and build similar designs where we can read on the oscilloscope and do side channel attacks, or we do other types of attack to just break into the provided security. We also have what we call statistical attacks, which is linear, differential, algebraic attacks that you just can use to break the mathematical model. And once you have a total break of this, then your system is normally useless and insecure. And what we are trying to provide here from the Center for Cybersecurity with different researchers across the globe. We have researchers from Reuven and researchers as well from DTU, and from the center working on making sure that we use hybrid techniques. So we don't use only the power of a single technique to attack a system, but if we got stuck, then we use, for example, a different attack mechanism. So remember I've told you that 128 look very strong because it takes 2 to 128, and then you have to use computational powers that will be 2 to 28 to just break into the system, which is signified as a very strong system. I'm not sure of how strong is exceptionally strong for 256. So when you build a system here, the takeaway is make sure that you don't, because 2 to 40 can be done in 1 day on MacBook Pro, on the current MacBook Pro, less than 1 day, this kind of search operation. So, and even 2 to 64 if you have certain algorithms. So you have to be sure not to use these encryption systems. Okay, so why do we do cryptanalysis? Because we want to improve the security margins. We have a risk here. If we don't do proper cryptanalysis, then we use a random ciphers around. So we have to improve this and make sure that we have proper security instilled. This is an example of an analysis we have done on print cipher, and that's a cipher used on RFID tags. And we discovered that there is a weakness because the designers of this cipher did not did this kind of what we call round counters, and they restricted the round counters distribution to this layer. The diffusion of this cipher is not proper. So you end up with a problem that for a certain number of keys, this encryption is useless. So you would have an invariant to space of keys, which means if you apply the encryption or you did not apply the encryption using that key, that set of key, that amount of keys, it will be like not applying the encryption at all. The encryption is not happening. So this is what we had here. This is an example of one of the keys that we use this attack on. So you could tell that the input is exactly the same as the output, which means that it's useless to apply all of these layers and build the hardware for it and assume that it will be secure. So this cipher had around, it had around 80 bits. So from the 80 bits, we discovered 2 to 56, a class of 2 to 56. So the real security of this cipher is 2 to 28, which is something you can break in less than 1 day. So you are using a cipher which claims to be secure because it's 2 to 80. So you're saying, okay, Huda, I'm using this. It's not easy for you to break it. Or I'm going to use the other version, the other variant, which we have here, is 1 to 60, which is not going to be easy for you to break it. But you will have weakness in the system. You didn't build your diffusion layer properly, so you can break into this system. The same thing here. We apply the attacks on what we call Simon and Speck, which are a family of ciphers that are meant to be used in a hardware environment, and they're meant to break, they're meant to build security for hardware devices, very, very light hardware devices, proposed by national security agencies, researcher, a national security agency in the US. So the community, of course, they were proposed post-Snowden declarations. So the community was motivated to, let's just try to attack this system. So attack the system, backward direction and forward direction. This is what we call impossible differential, and we discovered that we can attack it for up to now because we used our also hybrid techniques. We were able to attack it for 28 rounds. So thank you for your patience so far through going through this journey for cryptographic evolution. And the reason I'm taking you here is to ask you this question. Do you think what we're doing in building these primitives, and these are like the minimalistic, cryptographic elements here, is enough in terms of building security? Let's start with this. These are like waves of innovation. And apparently we're here. So it started with the first wave, that's iron, water, power, and textile, and then the second wave was steam power, third wave, electricity, chemical, so you could see the timeline here, chemical and internal combustion engine, and then you have the fourth wave around electronics and aviation and space, because that's around the time, you could see in 1950, around the time the first integrated circuit was designed, and then you get to see to have these waves. So the community, the question was about what's the next wave? What would be the next wave? So every wave had a highlight. So what would be the highlight of this wave? Would it be something around nanotechnology or global system, cloud computing, sustainable technology? Yeah, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, or all of these things, genomics. So I was in a talk recently, and the conversation was about the boundaries in this era is very minimal. So it would be about everything in here. So no boundaries anymore between science, because you get to use augmented reality and all of the improving computations for genomics, or in better cloud computing, or solutions, or in building a better nanotechnology. And cybersecurity should be part of this map somewhere here, where you build better security for all of these systems, otherwise it will not happen. The good thing about these waves of innovation is the fact that you have bad news. So before every wave, you would have some kind of distress or some kind of depression happening, and then there would be some kind of hopefully, a technological breakthrough. And we hope that given the amount of attacks that we have in the past, this is where I'm taking you right now, in the past year, there should be a technological revolution for cybersecurity and cryptography. Okay? So what would be the next wave for innovation? Would it be IoT? So we could see here, this is a forecast by Gartner, where they say that digital security and Internet of Things, this is a very late one, 2015, is a very important aspect, and it will just flourish around different areas here. Bitcoins and everything, a new system of banking. And we do have this law that says, and I'm taking you through this tour to make sure that you understand that whatever we build in crypto might not be enough, because we're still running a race in here against Moore's law, who's the co-founder of Intel, and he said the number of transistors incorporated in a single chip will double every 24 months, okay? And then if you wanted to measure this, again, a certain quantum computations, so would that allow you to do quantum computations on a chip? We don't know, because we do have a forecast that's saying in 2017 to 2026, this law will have a saturation around here because of the quantum computation that's coming in, okay? Oh, okay. So I'm sorry for this is like a commercial thing happening right now. So just to show you where are we going in terms of digital revolution, okay? And are we ready in terms of the security that we're building? Is it enough? What? So it seems that you need a connection. Anyway, so this will show you Finland 100 years from now. And this is a video that was released by Department of Innovation in Finland. Finland has some kind of mandate that in 100 years they want to be the first digital nation in Europe. And they took that message and they went contagiously throughout the world to make sure that they spread this message also to Singapore, because Singapore is building their Singapore Smart Nation, and to also bring it here to Dubai, because Dubai is building their smart government. And when you see this kind of videos, the major promotional aspect is about building IoT, building autonomous manufacturing unit, building autonomous biohuman, I would say, because just by looking at this person, you would know the blood pressure of that person, or you would analyze the health, analytics about that person, and privacy comes into play here. And primitives like ciphers and hash functions are widely used into these systems to make sure that they exist. How many of you in here do actually have Bitcoins? Nice, investors in the house. How much of that do you have? Yeah? So Bitcoins started with an evolution, and at the moment it's taking over the universe, because out of Bitcoins you introduce what we call blockchains, where people can aggregate all of these blockchains all around, or can mine all of these, certain blockchains and hash them and then use them for example, smart contracts, can use them for crowdfunding, can use them for, I've heard lately that 2 authorities in Dubai, that they're building a fully digital system, and they're sensitive authorities, one of them, yeah? It's not only disk, it's actually also, yeah. They're building a huge digital contract across their platform in order to make sure that every contract that comes to their units is highly digitalized, and all of this. So digital identity, digital access, and all of these distributed apps. The issue with this is, on the other hand, on the other side of the universe, it's good to have application in terms of when you build these crypto systems, because these crypto systems are built on hash functions, for example. But you also have the wave of people building their own, I would say, blockchain crackers and trying to crack these bitcoins, and they're building their farms where they're having the hardware to build this. I'm not sure if, yeah. Let me see if we have something here. So
it seems like they're not here for a paycheck. They're here because they.
So I just asked you in the beginning of this talk, what is a cryptology for a normal person? And the question was all of these pictures. And this is the question for a normal person. The person, Tatiana here, she's just a normal person. She doesn't know crypto, but this is crypto for her.
It seems like they're not here for a paycheck. They're here because they want to be a part of something that's really big that they can tell is happening all around them. To be able to look back and say, hey, we were there.
I say get rich or die trying.
Hi, my name is Liliana, and I live and work in Russia.
For the Crypto Rush movie, we want to film and show you the largest crypto mining farms in the world. Interview the industry leaders, experts, and visionaries.
Those guys are the heroes, in my opinion.
I'm at one of the hugest facilities in the world.
Blockchain processing space is not the friendliest environment.
Rock and roll.
So that's a normal person building their own farms and institution of making sure that they can mine bitcoins. And so, because this is the new rich of the world, where you can have a digital currencies without banking units in between, right? And no exchanges in between. And based on the same technology of bitcoins, you build blockchains, and then the chain of trust that you build there based on the hash functions, it propagates, and you can build all of the other technologies. So this is the revolution of cryptography and crypto systems in here. And all of you have heard, okay, so who does know quantum computations here in the house? And instead of computing based on, for example, normal computational power, that's normal bit sequence, you would have a parallel computation based on what we call qubits, okay? In order to speed up these computations on multiple levels. So this is like in a very, very simplified manner. So what normally takes you 2 to 28 here, 2 to n, and if n was 128, that's our sequence from before. What normally takes you 2 to 28 in order to break these sequences might take you seconds, actually, to break into the security of this. So this is also the dark side of crypto. How can we make sure that we can use crypto on the other side? And the rumor that ransomware started because Department of Justice in certain nation wanted to make sure that you can find computer crimes. So they ended up locking the machines and telling people that you have a fine, you have 72 hours to pay this, and then if you paid it, then we will unlock the, yes, yeah, exactly. And then, of course, people on the dark side decided to use that and unlock the universal, technology all around the world. So we end up with the attacks that like WannaCry and attacks like what we have like maybe 2 months ago when we heard the propagation of attacks going from Russia to London to Singapore, where Singapore nation resolved to just switching off internet from like major medical industry to make sure that they will not be hit by ransomware. And ransomware is a major encryptor. So you would have your system, your whole system will be encrypted, for example, your file system, and then you will receive a request of ransom. If you paid this ransom, your system will be decrypted and you will have access to your, can you imagine a doctor in the hospital who wants to access his medical records of the patients, or who want to access, or maybe if you have surgery, robotic surgeries, and these robotic systems, they're centralized in terms of control within certain units. If everything was locked and they have to unlock it, within certain hours what will happen. So thank you so much for your attention. I'd like to thank my amazing research team for the information that they have provided through this, because this is a collaborative work from my researchers in NYU Abu Dhabi and my collaborators from DTU and Leuven. I have Pandyan, who is in the house, who just arrived today, and he's my postdoc. And thank you, Pandyan, because we have been able to build an architecture, a simulation of a hardware architecture where we built a stream cipher that we use to encrypt, heart monitors and embed it in that system. And our goal is to make sure that we bridge the gap between what we develop in academia in terms of security and what the industry is using. So thank you so much for your attention, and I'll be more than happy to receive your questions. Yes. Okay. Questions? Tell me, Nasser.
Cybersecurity, if we have a secure system like blockchain.
So there are certain attacks on blockchains. In 2000, I think beginning of 2016, there was a major attack that happened, and then the people who built the protocol changed the attack that's around breaking the hashes of the system. So my take on this is, don't build a single technology and base the whole system on that single technology. We need to make sure that we have diversity in terms of the crypto protocols or the crypto primitives that we provide in the market or for industry, to make sure that we don't have governments and nations and everybody relying on one single technology. That's a blockchain, for example, no matter what was the variance for this. I mean, 2017, we've seen an attack on WPA2. Anybody in the house who've heard of that attack? The attack was directed toward Linux and Android devices. And then they have been able to dump the zero keys that they call in the system, or the encryption key, and then get direct access to all traffic. So what we have at the moment with WPA2 is the standard for wireless security, for Wi-Fi. So if you connect to your Wi-Fi, to your access point, that would be your encryption, decryption, in order for me not to read whatever you're sending. That is broken now. What's the alternative? We don't know, because there are only very few protocols for Wi-Fi security that been established and standardized. So my takeaway message out of this is, make sure, I don't think blockchain should be the go-to technology. There should be go-to technologies, and they should be equally secure and robust to make sure that you have an option.
My last question is that, is standard something good for cryptography, or it's not?
Is what?
Standard. Having a standard in cryptography, is that something good, or it's unpractical?
Okay, can I ask you a question? How many minutes does it take to have an attack on a major banking industry? Take a mind SWIFT attack that happened last year, $100 million taken away from central bank, the monetary fund in the US, I think, or somewhere. How many minutes did it take for that attack to happen?
I don't know, maybe less than a minute. Maybe a minute.
Few minutes.
Yeah.
How many minutes does it take for the community to build a standard?
Maybe a year.
I think 3 years.
3 years?
The process
Okay.
is 3 years.
Yeah.
So the attack is happening in a minute. The standardization is happening in 3 years.
So by the time you come up with a standard,
if you have a patient who is dying in a minute, would you tell him to wait 3 years until he will get the cure? So I don't think standardization is a silver bullet, unless you change the approaches. You need to change standardization approaches. There should be dynamic standardization approaches where you do have urgency of the situation, being taken in mind. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Can you introduce yourself and let me know where are you from?
Yes.
Nasser, he's from Space Agency. Thank you, Nasser, for this.
My name is Salwa. I did research on quantum cryptography in Belgium, in Brussels, a very long time ago.
I'm very abstract on this.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if you do research here in quantum cryptography.
Yes.
And what kind of research you're doing.
So what we do at the moment, there is a submission cycle happening. So It depends on if we will follow the submission cycle or will not be able to catch up with it because we only have 4 days for it. So we have 2 scales. One scale is we're trying to propose a symmetric encryption for post-quantum crypto. Nobody did that. Most of the encryption proposals that we have seen at the moment, of course we didn't see the final list because it's not released yet, was based on public. So we're trying to make sure that we have a few standardized, or maybe in the future they will be standardized primitives that work on symmetric and that work also not only on symmetric on secret sharing, symmetric secret sharing. And by default, you can use these as an alternative for blockchains and all of these kind of solutions. And we do the attack. So right now we're trying to do an aggregation of hardware attacks because we do the links between the different attacks on these, on whatever we know right now and the literature for this post-quantum thing. So we're trying to work on attacking the benchmark that the community will provide because 30th of November, the community will tell you, these are the list of designs, these are the list of post-quantum algorithms that you have. So we're building the attack to make sure that we can.
But do you actually know already how to implement it, like physically?
We have few implementations to them because most of these systems are built on lattice-based crypto or code-based crypto, so they're an inheritance of existing systems. So on these ones, we know the parameters and the margins of attacks, but if it's something totally new, then we have to figure out how can we do that. So it would be a journey of learning. So I hope you'll enjoy it. I hope you can join us. Let me know if you're interested. Where are you right now? We'll talk later. Another question? Yes?
Yeah, hi.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Ahmed Suleiman. I'm a master student at Khalifa University.
Hi, Ahmed.
So my question was, you mentioned briefly about IoT devices, and we know that they have limited computation, limited memory, limited energy, and sometimes they carry sensitive data. So what do you think are some practical recommendations in encrypting data or securing data on IoT devices against attackers who might have much larger resources compared to IoT devices?
Okay. So it's a very hard question to answer because IoT devices by nature, they have diversity and they come from different structures, manufacturers, different standards. What you can do is one of the solutions that was proposed by Professor Nick Ferris and our researcher, Ala, she's not in the house, is to have a middleware where you push, which is not ideal, which is you push the security to this middleware and then this middleware will control your security parameters and push the security to the actuators and sensors. That's not ideal solution, but that would give you heterogeneity in terms of the security that you're building within the systems. Maybe it's good to push updates, but it's not ideal for a single point of failure. Okay? And the second one is we need to build better crypto to fit into these devices because at the moment there are only few devices that have proper crypto mechanisms that are built for IoT devices. And this is one of the initiatives that we have in my research group is how to build hardware crypto that fits into these devices. We don't want to just build something conceptual and then leave it to the future for somebody to put it on hardware. Hassan?
First of all, thank you for the talk. I haven't seen her talk about cryptography in a while, so I appreciate to see a big audience and giving them awareness about cryptography. Just your personal opinion, what do you think the future of cryptography? We got, authenticated encryption is coming up next month, I think. They're going to choose a winner, I think. So what do you think is the next step? Is people going to be moving away from AES? In your personal opinion, what do you think is the next step for standard, not quantum encryption, but your standard encryptions?
I think people should move away from AES. It's 25 years now for AES, and it was the standard for encryption. And I don't like single solutions. I prefer that we have alternatives. So it's nice to, in the literature, we do have alternatives that exist. Attacks are not ideal on them. So you could use them. So the future of a crypto is, I would say, from my point of view, is to make sure that you can merge as much, and cryptanalysis, let's say as well, you can merge as much as you can from different variations. So you can't just say authenticated encryption came into the play because you wanted something that's symmetric and you wanted something that has the flavor of public key crypto, the authentication part and everything. So this type of generic view of making sure that you have diversity in terms of characteristic of a single crypto component is important. And I think most of the futuristic crypto primitives, which are supposed to be the units, will have that kind of flavor. Yeah. So.
Thanks. Just a second question then. In regards to quantum computers, the entanglements of qubits are still a bit, they're figuring it out, but it's still under development. In your opinion, how many more years do we have before we move to quantum?
Oh my God. Don't put this prediction
I really
on
like
me.
to, please go ahead.
So I don't know, seriously, because we have speculations that says it already exists, and the scientific community is saying it does not. So again, we need to have a consortium of people from science, industry, and government working together on this. It does not exist at the moment, this consortium. You would have people in the academy doing their own thing, and people in government doing something behind closed doors, and maybe there are like few bits of collaboration. So I can't tell. Literally, I can't. It might exist, it might not exist. I don't have any evidence. Yeah. Thank you so much, Hassan. We have, hi. Salvatore from Dubai Electronic Security Center.
Hi. Very nice, very interesting speech. Thank you for inviting us.
Here.
And I want to ask you a personal opinion, because I have seen you put singularity in 10 years from now. What do you think will be the impact of singularity on security?
Singularity of security?
Oh, the impact of singularities on security.
Well,
because I think what we are talking today in maybe 5 years will be useless, probably.
I know. And this is why in this talk, the major message and takeaway is, how do I say it? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. So don't build your security based on a single option or a single alternative. You have to make sure that you build several alternatives, not a single protocol that's the silver bulletproof because it was standardized, for example, and not a single encryption standard that existed for 25 years. And I don't know what will happen if tomorrow we wake up with somebody saying AES is totally broken. What's the next on the cycle? We do have others standardized, but they don't match the security level of AES. And what will happen if, for example, all of the IoT devices will not find the proper cryptographic primitives that should fit into their hardware? I think the community here, the academic community, should work more into providing an applied solution. We have to provide diversity, we have to provide more solutions and make sure that they fit into these devices.
Maybe we can provide some solution. We can talk later on. Yeah.
We should work together, right? Yes, that's 100%. More questions? Okay. You have the gentleman there, and then afterwards. Can you please introduce yourself and where are you from?
I'm Hussein Mohammed. I'm a freshman at Khalifa University. I don't know a lot, so I'm sorry if it's stupid, but what's stopping you, someone from going through the hardware and figuring out the cipher?
We are doing it at the moment in our research group. And the major motto that we have in our research group is there are no silos in terms of working on research. So try to break boundaries to the best that we can. I've worked for 12 years here in UAE in Department of Defense, and I was lucky enough to see how things worked inside certain R&D platforms. It was, I had a very transparent journey, so where I would work on my crypto analysis or whatever I'm doing, and I have a view of the R&D component happening in avionics system. And then I could go and tell this person, oh, we would have this kind of vulnerability happening here and that kind of vulnerability happening there. That empowered me. So when I traveled to do my PhD, and the first day I asked my advisor, what's the recipe for building an ideal cipher or a secure cipher? It's like, it does not exist. You have to go throughout all the literature and search left and right. And by the end of the journey, I knew why, because you'd have one group focusing on hardware and one group focusing only the theoretical parts and one group focusing on cryptanalysis. It is rare to find one group that is holistic, where you find them focusing on symmetric, on public, on hardware, on software. Maybe the group in Leuven is the closest one. So I would say build a holistic team is one of the components that you should look for. Make sure that when you analyze your system, that's what we're doing right now. We're not building something that's theoretically secure. We're building something that is theoretically secure. Then the next step, making sure it's practically secure. And then the next step, can we put it in hardware and tape it out? And then a step afterwards, can we reverse engineer it and just see through the layers? And we go back into all of these. So experimenting through all of these cycles is important. And not just say, okay, I am this person. I don't know if you noticed at the beginning of the talk, most of the people who contributed to crypto, they were scientists, I don't know how to, knowledge kind of pool of people. True, they have the narrow focus of their field, but they also had the peripheral vision. So that's what you should do when you build your futuristic crypto in order to build the crypto for community and society.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from that side. Yes.
Hi, thank you very much. That's really eye-opening. My name is Syed Abu Shark. I'm a lawyer, so this is brand new to me. But throughout your presentation, I was thinking about the different ways that this technology can affect laws, whether it's contract, tort, privacy, IP, copyright, banking laws, even simple human rights laws. They're not simple, they're important.
Yeah.
Do you think that various legislatures around the world, such as the EU, in the UK, the US, even here in the UAE, do you think they are capable of meeting the pace of the rapid development of this technology?
Maybe yes and no, because most of law enforcement around the world, they would have their digital forensic teams, and their digital forensic teams should know the rapid technology that's happening in here, the attacks, and they should know how to break it and build it. So if they are presented with cases that would involve breach of security or confidentiality based on these technologies, then they should be able to address and detect that, if they're competent enough, of course. No, because I would say, are we there in terms of laws, in terms of digital laws? Do we recognize and address all of the aspects we need to address in terms of privacy, in terms of different data protection law when it comes to using these kind of technologies? We don't have cyber governance. Like, how many times did you hear of state attacks happening from one country to the next? And what type of punishment did you see happening on that state? Like, you've heard about the attacks happening, like all of the spyware that was used and against Germany, for example, to global espionage, to hear about all of their economic secrets, and Angela Merkel phone that was being used. But like, what is the attribution, and what's the punishment for the other state? It does not exist, and for this we need to have a global component that will address cybersecurity, and some global body that will enforce this on these local players. Maybe it's a good solution, or maybe it's a bad solution, I don't know. So again, this is a very good example where you need to have a lawyer within your security teams. And we do have somebody who's a social scientist and economist within our team. We're also looking forward to make sure that lawyers are involved in this, because we don't want to build the technology and then there is no standard to it, there is no law and legislation for it, and then it goes nowhere. Yes, Nasser?
I think there's a couple of parts that probably where the law could, but maybe you could add into that. One is that export and import control, where some technology, whether it's hardware or even a software, is controlled by import and export laws. And second part also, when you come from intellectual property rights, that basically if you do something like that, that you become, let's say, a cyber criminal by that.
On a
So you're
global level.
criminalized, exactly. So if someone catch you, or
Yeah.
you're criminalized by that. Throughout your presentation, you had the word innovation in a number of slides. To your knowledge, from where you are in the R&D part of cryptography. So where do you see the next innovation in cryptography? What's next?
That's what Hassan asked me earlier, right? So thank you, Nasser. You would know because of the standardization part. The part about export law, we have to be careful, because if a certain country is applying their export law to a technology that I'm importing, and that country is the main provider of this technology, I will end up in a situation where there is a monopoly of security. A single country of the world dictating types of technology that every country should use in the world. And this is what happened for the current state. It dictates the level of security you should use. It dictates, I don't know. We should reconsider the way export laws are working, to make sure that if you build security, then the right to having a proper security should go to all nations, not only to a single nation who built the technology, if you're buying this technology. The next innovation in cybersecurity. The next innovation, not in cybersecurity, in cryptology. I say that having what I call a new cryptogenome that's not specific to target specific functionality like confidentiality. You will not have something like hash functions and ciphers and authentication mechanisms separately. You will have one genome of cipher, or whatever you call it, a crypto unit, that will address all of these components. Maybe this is something that already exists in terms of protocols, because this is what we call a crypto protocol, because it provides all of these components. But what I'm talking about is keeping that unit efficient, secure. Efficient, it means it can fit into hardwares. It can fit maybe the next wave of innovation. Can we fit security in energy harvesting devices? These devices, if you have one temperature of difference, then they wouldn't work in a human body, right? All of these implants that you have within, like brain implants and the implants that you have within your body. So I would say like fitting crypto into the minimalistic unit. Okay? Thank you so much. I have one last question from the back.
Thank you. Stimulating talk. I'm with the National Archives. One question I have is, when you have to make a decision on what encryption technology to use, who makes that decision? Does it depend on the industry, on the application, on the users? When is it government? When is it an industry group? When can you leave it to a company?
Okay, so several factors will come into play. Number one, export rules. Are you allowed to have that kind of technology within your country? Number two, the environment that you will use this encryption in. So if you want to use something for smartphone, an encryption for a smartphone, then you have to pick something that's light, something that runs faster. You might end up using lower security parameters instead of, it depends on the computational power of a phone or the computational power of RFID tag. You might want to use lower security parameters, as we have seen in the previous slide, like 80 bits or 160 bits. So the environment governs a sector of it. The application governs another sector of it. So if you want to use some crypto primitive for stream video or for a voice conversation, one of the hardest applications to implement until recently was how can you provide end-to-end encryption for voice, because you would have packets being dropped and encryption of packets dropped. The decryption will also have, it would be an issue for the decryption to make sure that you have to have the full packets received. So stream ciphers in that sense. So all of these things are very important. Environment, application, environment itself, not only the execution environment, but the application setup that you will have. Export rules is something that I think it should not exist. Because if you build a technology, then you have to give the full technology. Otherwise, you shouldn't impose Trojans or unannounced Trojans to the nations. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.